Hello everyone, I'm Kim, this is the Eco Tree, and today I thought I would share with you how I research and plan my new products for Etsy. So just before we get into it, this is just simply what I do. It may or may not work for you, you might have your own process, but I just thought it'd be interesting because if nothing else, it's good to be nosy sometimes, eh? Okay, so step one in the whole process is just knowing what I want to make, in a vague sense of the word. And that is pretty much centered around what I know I can and enjoy making. So for me, that looks like clothing, accessories, and bags. So I also know that I want my items to be truly handmade by me, slow made, inspired by nature, embroidered as much as possible because I just love that process. And also with this latest collection, I really wanted it to be hand dyed. That's not quite worked out, but I've managed to turn it around and made it hand painted, which you can actually see some of the stuff in the background. I won't show you because it's meant to be a surprise. So I know roughly what I'm making and the feelings and the ethos behind it. So then for step two, I turn my focus on who is going to want those items. That's so important. This, I guess, is where your perfect customer comes in. The ideal customer isn't set in stone. This isn't the only person you're going to sell to. This is just an exercise to help focus your mind on a particular person. But when you think of your items, you might be thinking, I want to sell these to lots of people. But try and think really objectively about the sort of person who is likely to buy them. So the people that I'm going to be attracting are going to be specifically looking for handmade or slow made or artisan goods. They are not going to be looking for mass-produced, cheap stuff. And then the next step I think about is where they hang out. And this is important too, because you need to be able to talk to them. And I see this over and over again, where there's a mismatch between what you do and what you offer and the people you're telling. And I've done this myself, it's easily done. So you have to think about where they hang out. And this is a bit of a balancing act because you don't just want to go to where your customers are if it's going to be a platform that you hate being on. Facebook, you will never find me there again. And also time is so precious. So you've got to just choose the ones that you enjoy hanging out on too. Okay, so you've got a very vague idea of what area you want to make your things in. You have a vague idea about who your customer is and an idea of where they hang out. Now we're on to step four. You can then start drilling down into what these people like, what fashions they wear, what colours they tend to choose, art they're interested in. You can look at the music they listen to and the content they create, memes they post. This is where I go to Pinterest and I create a board that it builds up a feeling. It's just an idea of colours and anything that I think represents my customer. For example, for my summer launch, I ended up with a board full of symbols, which wasn't intentional. I just kept adding them. And when I went back, I started to see patterns. And that's what you're looking for. You're looking for patterns that you can draw inspiration from. And now we come up to step five, which is to basically build a huge long list of things that you would like to make. Actually, there's three parts that come to that. It has to be things that you can make, things that you would like to make, and things that you genuinely believe your ideal customer would buy. That's key. And so many of us forget to do that. We make a bunch of stuff that we like and then we wonder why it doesn't sell. And sometimes it's because people just don't want to buy it, which is a horrible thing to have to face. And I've been there myself. I've shown you the jumper in the past. But yes, don't skip that. Something that you can make, something that you want to make, and something that people will actually want to buy. E-rank, that's my next tip. You can search for things that people have been searching for within a period of time, so you can spot trends, or you can spot patterns, you can just get ideas. But it is important to search and see just how many people are searching for the things that you're thinking of making. What you want to do at this stage is just make a huge long list and brain dump. It doesn't matter how weird and wonderful the ideas are, stick them on there. This is actually a really important exercise. It gets it out of your head and clears it so that you can go on to the next stage thinking a little bit more clearly. So this is what I do when I've got my huge long list. I then go through and I can usually see instantly which ones that actually felt like a really great idea in that moment, but already I'm thinking, nah. Some of them you want to research a little more, and that's where eRank is good. But I usually give myself a couple of weeks to do this, because when I go on eRank to research all of these ideas that I've got, I do have a tendency to just fall down a rabbit hole and research other ideas that weren't even on the list, but I've just seen something on the screen that's just, made another little idea pop into my head. I personally give myself a good few weeks to do this. I get distracted by all of the shinies, and as much as I use eRank to research my list of ideas, I usually end up adding more ideas to it, which is kind of annoying when I'm trying to whittle it down. And a few other things that I bear in mind when I'm whittling down my list is whether or not these things match my brand and my core values. A couple of things that are quite boring but very necessary: how long it would take me to make them. I had to cross off quite a few things off of my list this time round. I wanted to make things that would have just taken way too long to make. And then the other thing is how much I would have to sell them for to cover the cost of materials and time and Etsy fees. If that completely prices me out of my niche, then maybe it's not something that's worth me doing. And I kind of touched on this before, but another big factor when choosing whether or not to make something for me is how sustainable and eco-friendly it is. So all of those questions help me whittle down my brain dump list into a much more manageable one. And my next step is to decide on when I'm going to launch this item, or in this situation, my collection. I have a date in mind, and I then reverse engineer to where I am so I can figure out how much time I have. And that sometimes, very often, then whittles down the list even further, because I might decide that I want to make 10 items, but then realize that realistically, I can only make 5 of them. And then the next step is to make the items, which is where I currently am. And then the last step, when I'm making a new item, is to figure out which price I'm going to sell it at. And I do that last because I also want to take into account how much time it takes me to make something. I always find that if I leave the pricing to the end, I can price it more accurately. And again, I will use an Etsy calculator for this, because it helps me not just make a profit, but make sure that I cover those fees and I cover all of the materials and time. And it just means that the overall price accurately portrays how much time and effort and materials went into making that thing, and make sure that I get paid a proper wage. You hear a lot of people going,
"Oh, that's way too much. I could buy that cheaper."
Good for you. Go do it. If you want to see any more behind the scenes, by the way, I share that on my Instagram account, and with some of the ups and the downs, like having to push back a deadline. I thought I had created the perfect deadline for me this time around, but I'd forgotten about my daughter's half-term holiday and a bank holiday, and then she was ill just beforehand, which meant I lost a chunk of time. So I'm a bit behind, and I've had to push back my launch date. So it's now 1st of July. We're getting there. And that's it. That's your lot. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next week. Ta-ra.